Hi friends, host Eric here, host of Talking with Famous People, and this video I want to talk about objectivity and subjectivity. And one of the reasons we get confused a lot about what those things mean, what they actually mean, and how it relates to metaphysical and physical and cognitive functions. So I'll try to do all that pretty quick after a bit of a pause. So first of all, note that objectivity and subjectivity are TI concerns. If we're talking about objectivity and subjectivity, we're already talking about a TI framework, okay? Because TE is not concerned about that. You might think it's more objectively the case that, I'm going to go back to this example. The dam broke. This part of the city is flooded. You might say, well, that's more objectively true than some metaphysical claim, Eric. No. Thinking about its objective trueness is entering into the meaning domain instead of the actual thing domain. The actual thing is about what are we going to do about this? There's water all over the place. The dam broke. That's objectively true. But what are we doing about the water? Quit talking to me about objective truth. You are standing in water. But I'm pointing out the fact that this is more objectively true than something that you're talking about in terms of meanings, Eric. Oh, you mean your status of objective truth is more significant than the fact that you're wet? The thing is, you can't even enter into a discussion about objectivity, subjectivity without getting into the metaphysical realm, and thus entering into the realm of TI.
Yeah, but the fact that the dam broke is objective the same way as the fact that you're being wet is objective. So both
No, me
people see
being
the same.
wet is me being wet. The fact that we can deem that objectively so, or subjectively not, or subjectively less so in some regard, that is a metaphysical status that we assign to the sentences we're speaking, not to the reality we're talking about.
What do you mean? If you're wet, you're wet.
Okay, so, well, that's true, but there's a difference between the words "you're wet" and actually being wet. TE is concerned about actually being wet and actually making oneself dry. Okay? TI is concerned about drawing these distinctions between objectivity and subjectivity. Now, the problem is this. When I say something's objective or subjective, what I mean is, as far as TE is concerned, it's it's not interested in any of those issues. It's interested in getting itself dry. Did you successfully get yourself out of the water and are you dry? Well, that problem solved now. We never even touch the area of objective or subjectivity because we're not talking about the language that we're using. We're talking about the reality. So that's causal, which means it is subjective, which is to say there's no way to detach that experience from the experience itself and still have it be retain any of its physical world reality that you're trying to assign to it, right? You're saying, but it has a physical world reality that a metaphysical thing doesn't. Therefore, it's more objectively so. No, the fact that it has a physical reality, that there is a physical reality that you're talking about, does not mean that what you're saying is about the physical reality itself. It means what you're saying is about you're talking about the physical reality. So, okay, this is how we know TE is subjective and how we know TI is objective. The way is because you were holding these things in dispute, and we are disputing them back and forth. Objectivity and subjectivity are distinctions along the line of TI um, conditionality shit. So it's like, all right, if if something functions as knowledge, it means it's not in any dispute. It's held as axiomatic. We, if what you're saying by if what you're saying also proves that the sun goes around the earth, then something's wrong with what you're talking about, because we can all agree that the Earth goes around the sun. Okay? So that's something that would be considered objectively true, because not because of any reality, but because of consensus. There's not any disputing it because everybody agrees. That because everybody agrees is good enough reason for it to be considered axiomatic for a TI framework, because it's an approximative mechanism anyway. What it gains in objectivity, it loses in um, particularism, right? It loses in the ability to be necessarily applied to a particular case, but it gains in its objectivity as a consequence. Necessarily, objectivity means removing from the individual the choice to feel how one wants to feel about it. It's not like a birthday card you receive. I can feel this can make me feel sad if I want. Grandma's getting older, and so it is a nice card, but it still makes me sad. No one's gonna be like, that's not logical. Grandma's a good family member, and you should feel happy when she sends you a card. Nobody's gonna say that, hopefully. Why not? Well, because introverted feelings is subjective. Now, look, here's the thing. TE will say something along the lines of, well, don't read the cards then, if you don't want to feel sad. And then maybe TE will come up with a good solution, such as, uh, all I read all these cards later by myself, and then later they don't read the cards or whatever. That's subjective. It doesn't have to answer to anything but its own self-defined goal and outcome. It doesn't have to be held up to scrutiny for other people. So FE is objective in the same way that TI is objective, which is to say, it takes data and it draws conclusions from it, and those conclusions and the data and the links between the data and the conclusions can be put out for other people to look at and scrutinize and disagree with and present alternative reasons for. I can say casual INTP seems to be mad at Ken because he said these mean things to him the other day. And somebody else might go, no, he says that all the time. It's just their way of joking around. They like each other fine. And then that would be answering it by saying, you misinterpreted a small amount of data, but it's TI. We use TI with FE. They go together for a reason. Anyway, the thing is, obviously, the reason why they're not necessarily always cooperative with each other is because they value different kinds of outcomes. So those outcomes, the valued currency will determine the extent to which you prioritize one over the other. But it's the underlying mechanism for both is the processing of data and using the ability to make objective verifications or falsifications of that data to adjust one's model. Whereas with TE, it's about verifying with one's internal subjective goal that you've done enough to meet your own personal criterion, which is not subject to any scrutiny. And that's explanation of objectivity, subjectivity. Remember, it is a indication of rhetorical slope in TI. If something's really objectively true, that means you have a very steep rhetorical slope to make the argument that it's not. If something's subjective, then you have a very easy slope, rhetorical slope, to make the argument that it might be true or that it might not be true or something like that, or that it's not absolutely true. Or if it's subjective and you acknowledge its subjectivity, it's easy to make the argument that it's a valid thing to believe. If it's subjective and you try to make the argument that it's objective, it's very difficult. It's a very steep slope to climb. So, objectivity and subjectivity are indications of difficulty of rhetorical uh, negating, basically. If something, whether something's affirmed or negated, whatever it is you're trying to do, how hard it is a matter of rhetorical slope. So that is what objectivity and subjectivity really are, and they are subsets of a TI framework, and they don't have any meaning outside of that framework, TI-FE framework, and blah, 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 blah. You heard me say it all right now. I don't need to repeat it all again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese, and that's objectively necessarily true. This following statement is, if you do forget to eat plenty of cheese, you won't grow up big and strong. Objectively true. Mm-hmm.
No.